Good morning, and today we continue with the reading of Jeremiah Burroughs' The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment, beginning on page 35. The eighth thing in contentment is submitting and taking pleasure in God's disposal. That is to say, the soul that has learned this lesson of contentment looks up to God in all things. He does not look down at the instruments and means, so as to say that such a man did it, and that it was the unreasonableness of such and such instruments and similar barbarous usage by such and such, but he looks up to God. A contented heart looks to God's disposal and submits to God's disposal. That is, he sees wisdom, God's wisdom in everything. In his submission, he sees his sovereignty, but what makes him take pleasure is God's wisdom. The Lord knows how to order things better than I. The Lord sees further than I do. I only see things at present, but the Lord sees a great while from now. And how do I know but that, had it not been for this affliction, I should have been undone? I know that the love of God may as well stand with an afflicted condition as with a prosperous condition. There are reasonings of this kind in a contented spirit, submitting to the disposal of God. The last thing is, this is in every condition. Now we shall enlarge on this a little. Submitting to God in whatever affliction befalls us, as to the kind of affliction, as to the time and continuance of the affliction, as to the variety and changes of the affliction. Whatever they are, yet there must be a submission to God's disposal in every condition. As to the kind of affliction, many men and women will in general say that they must submit to God in affliction. I suppose that if you were to go now from one end of this congregation to the other and speak thus to every soul, would you not submit to God's disposal in whatever condition he might place you? You would say, God forbid that it should be otherwise. But we have a saying, there is a great deal of deceit in general statements. In general, you would submit to anything. But what if it is in this or that particular case which crosses you most? Then, anything but that. We are usually apt to think that any condition is better than the condition in which God has placed us. Now this is not contentment. It should be not only to any condition in general, but for the kind of affliction, including that which most crosses you. God, it may be, strikes you in your child. Oh, if it had been in my possessions, you say, I would be content. Perhaps he strikes you in your marriage. Oh, you say, I would rather have been stricken in my health. And if he had struck you in your health? Oh, then if it had been in my trading, I would not have cared. But we must not be our own carvers. Whatever particular afflictions God may place us in, we must be content in them. Number 2, there must be a submission to God in every affliction as to the time and continuance of the affliction. Perhaps I could submit and be content, says someone, but this affliction has been on me a long time, 3 months, a year, many years, and I do not know how to yield and submit to it. My patience is worn out and broken. It may even be a spiritual affliction. You could submit to God, you say, in outward affliction, but not in soul affliction. Or if it were an affliction upon the soul, trouble upon the heart, if it were a withdrawing of God's face, yet if this had been but for a little while, I could submit. But to seek God for so long, and still he does not appear, how shall I bear this? We must not be our own disposers for the time of deliverance, any more than for the kind and way of deliverance. I will give you a scripture or two about this. That we are to submit to God for the time as well as the kind of affliction. See the latter end of the first chapter of Ezekiel. When I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. The prophet was cast down upon his face, but how long must he lie upon his face? And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak to thee. And the Spirit entered into me, and he spake to me, and set me upon my feet. Ezekiel was cast down upon his face, and there he must lie till God should bid him to stand up. Yea, and not only so, but till God's Spirit came into him and enabled him to stand up. So when God casts us down, we must be content to lie till God bids us to stand up, and God's Spirit enters us to enable us to stand up. You know how Noah was put into the ark. Certainly he knew there was much affliction in the ark with all the creatures shut up for 12 months together. It was a mighty thing. Yet God having shut him up, even though the waters were assuaged, Noah was not to come out of the ark till God bid him. So though we be shut up in great afflictions, and we may think of this and that and the other means to come out of that affliction, yet till God opens the door, we should be willing to stay. God has put us in, and God will bring us out. So we read in the Acts of Paul, when they had shut him in prison and would have sent for him out. No, says Paul, they shut us in, let them come and fetch us out. So in a holy, gracious way should a soul say, well, this affliction I am brought into is by the hand of God, and I am content to be here till God brings me out himself. God requires it at our hands that we should not be willing to come out till he comes and fetches us out. In Joshua 4:10, there is a remarkable story that may serve our purpose very well. We read of the priests that they bore the ark and stood in the midst of the Jordan. You know, when the children of Israel went into the Jordan, into the land of Canaan, they went through the river Jordan. Now, to go through the river Jordan was a very dangerous thing, but God had told them to go. They might have been afraid of the water coming in upon them, but mark, it is said, the priests that bare the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan till everything was finished that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses commanded Joshua. And the people hasted and passed over. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over, that the ark of the Lord passed over, and the priests in the presence of the people. Now it was God's disposal that all the people should pass over first, that they should be safe on land, but the priests must stand still till all the people had passed over, and then they must leave to go. But they must stay till God would have them go, stay in all that danger. For certainly to reason and sense there was a great deal of danger in staying, for the text says that the people hasted over. But the priests, they must stay till the people have gone, stay till God calls them out from that place of danger. And so many times it proves the case that God is pleased to dispose of things so that his ministers must stay longer in danger than the people. And likewise magistrates and those in public places, which should make people to be satisfied and contented with a lower position into which God has put them. Though your position is low, yet you are not in the same danger as those who are in a higher position. God calls those in public positions to stand longer in the gap and place of danger than other people. But we must be content to stay, even in the Jordan, till the Lord shall be pleased to call us out. Number 3, and then for the variety of our condition. We must be content with the particular affliction and the time and all the circumstances about the affliction, for sometimes the circumstances are greater afflictions than the afflictions themselves, and for the variety. God may exercise us with various afflictions, one after another, as has been very noticeable even of late, that many who have been plundered and come away afterwards have fallen sick and died. And they have fled for their lives, and afterwards the plague has come among them. And if not that affliction, it may be some other. It is very rarely that one affliction comes alone. Commonly, afflictions are not single things, but they come upon the neck of another. God may strike one man in his possessions, then in his body, then in his name, wife, child, or dear friend, and so it comes in a variety of ways. It is the way of God ordinarily, you may find it by experience, that one affliction seldom comes alone. Now this is hard. When one affliction follows after another, where there is a variety of afflictions, when there is a mighty change in one's condition up and down, this way and that, there is indeed the trial of a Christian. Now there must be submission to God's disposal in them. I remember it was said even of Cato, who was a heathen, that no man saw him to be changed, though he lived in a time when the commonwealth was so often changed. Yet it is said of him he was the same still, though his condition was changed, and he passed through a variety of conditions. Oh, that the same could be said of many Christians, that though their circumstances are changed, yet that nobody could see them changed. They are the same. Did you see what a gracious, sweet, and holy temper they were in before? They are in it still. Thus we are to submit to the disposal of God in every condition. Contentment is the inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit, freely submitting to and taking pleasure in God's disposal in every condition. That is the description, and in it 9 distinct things have been opened up, which we summarize as follows. First, that contentment is heart work within the soul. Second, it is the quieting of the heart. Thirdly, it is the frame of the spirit. Fourthly, it is a gracious frame. Fifthly, it is the free working of this gracious frame. Sixthly, there is in it a submission to God, sending the soul under God. Seventhly, there is a taking pleasure in the hand of God. Eighthly, all is traced to God's disposal. Ninthly, in every condition, however hard it be, and however long it continue. Now those of you who have learned to be content have learned to attain to these various things. I hope that the very opening of these things may so far work on your hearts that you may lay your hands upon your hearts on what has been said. I say that the very telling you what the lesson is may cause you to lay your hands on your hearts and say, Lord, I see there is more to Christian contentment than I thought there was, and I have been far from learning this lesson. Indeed, I have only learned my ABCs in this lesson of contentment. I am only in the lower form of Christ's school, if I am in it at all. We shall speak of these things more later, but my particular aim in opening this point is to show what a great mystery there is in Christian contentment, and how many distinct lessons there are to be learned, that we may come to attain to this heavenly position which St. Paul attained. This last section of the chapter is really, really good. Like the summary on page 40 that we just read. And of course, remembering that definition, contentment is the inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit, freely submitting to and taking pleasure in God's disposal in every condition. The highlight of this section to me was the statement of the under number 1, under point number 9, subpoint number 1. He says, in general, you would submit to anything, but what if it is in this or that particular case which crosses you most? Then, anything but that. I think oftentimes we give ourselves credit because we live in generalities. Well, I'm not too bad a person, or I read my Bible a little, or I think of God some. We kind of generalize, flatten out everything. So I think there's a place for particularity sometimes in our Christian life, and thinking about how am I doing in this area, in that area, and sometimes that can reveal realities that maybe are not pleasing, but maybe can cause us to face them and come to God with them and receive His help and His strength. And so I like that quote, though. That's a very useful quote. We're good at anything as long as we keep it general, but when we get specific, then things are often revealed. So so far so good. That's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called The Mystery of Contentment. We'll get into that next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good day.